My father shoved my 9-year-old son off his chair at the Christmas table. "That seat isn't for you," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Ethan fell sideways. The chair legs scraped. His shoulder hit the hardwood floor first, then his back. The sound wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a crash. It was worse. A dull, hollow thud that landed somewhere deep in my chest and stayed there. 12 relatives sat frozen. Forks hovered above plates. Someone's wine glass trembled but didn't spill. No one stood. No one reached for him. No one said his name. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I stood up, pulled my coat from the back of my chair, and said 5 words. "We are leaving, right now." The room didn't explode. It collapsed inward. My mother's wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered against the floor. Red spread across the white rug like something alive. My father's face drained of color so fast, it looked rehearsed, like a man who had suddenly realized he'd stepped past a line he couldn't see until it was gone. I picked Ethan up. He was shaking, small, controlled shakes, the kind kids get when they're trying not to cry because they don't understand what they did wrong. I held his head against my shoulder, felt his breath against my neck, and walked out without another word. 3 days later, my father received a certified letter that made his hands shake so badly he couldn't sign for it. My name is Rachel Moore. I'm 36 years old, a single mother, and a pediatric physical therapist. And this is the story of the moment I stopped trying to earn a place in my family and started protecting my child instead. Have you ever stayed quiet to keep the peace, only to realize that silence cost your child something you can never give back? Before that night, Christmas at my parents' house had always followed the same rules, not written rules, understood ones, the kind that don't need to be explained because they're enforced through looks, pauses, and the slow withdrawal of affection. The dining table seated 12 comfortably, 14 if you counted folding chairs. But my father believed tables reflected hierarchy. He sat at the head, my mother to his left, my sister Claire and her husband beside him, their 2 biological children seated close enough that he could reach out and touch their shoulders when he laughed. Ethan and I sat at the far end, every year, closest to the kitchen, closest to the draft, close enough to hear plates clatter in the sink while everyone else talked over candlelight. I told myself it didn't matter. Chairs were just chairs. Kids didn't notice. Peace was more important than pride. I told myself a lot of things. 2 days before Christmas, my mother called, not to ask what Ethan wanted, not to ask if he still liked dinosaurs or whether his reading improved. She called to say, "Make sure Ethan doesn't wear that blue sweater. Claire bought the kids matching outfits and I don't want confusion in the photos." I said, "Okay." That night, Ethan stood in front of the mirror in his room, tugging at the hem of a plain gray sweater I'd laid out. "Mom," he said, "can I sit next to you this year?" I told him yes. I believed it. Christmas Day came heavy and gray, snow that didn't stick, the kind that looks pretty but turns to slush underfoot. Ethan carried a folded piece of construction paper with him into the house, gripping it carefully like it might break. He'd drawn it himself, crayons and markers, uneven lines, bold colors. It showed all of us around the same table, me, him, Grandma, Grandpa, Aunt Claire, cousins, everyone smiling, everyone equal. He wanted to give it to my father before dinner. My father opened the door, nodded at Ethan without bending down, and stepped aside to let Claire's kids rush past him. He scooped them up, laughing, telling everyone how tall they'd gotten. Ethan stood still, holding the drawing. Inside, I saw the table set, 12 place settings, real plates, cloth napkins, name cards in my mother's handwriting. Ethan's name wasn't there. Behind us, near the kitchen door, someone had set up a small folding table, 1 chair, 1 plate, paper napkin. I looked at my mother. She avoided my eyes. "Mom," I said quietly, "Ethan can sit with us." She leaned in, voice low. Don't make this a thing, Rachel. He's fine. Dinner started. I watched Ethan from the corner of my eye, sitting alone, eating carefully, his drawing still folded beside his plate. He kept glancing toward the main table, toward me. Halfway through the meal, he stood up. He didn't ask permission, he didn't look angry, he just carried his plate, walked to the empty chair beside me, and climbed up. He unfolded the drawing and placed it on the table. "I made this for everyone," he said. That was when my father stood. He walked around the table slowly, deliberately, like a man making sure all eyes were on him. "That seat isn't for you," he said. I opened my mouth. "She's not your—" my mother started. "He is my son," I said. My father didn't look at me, he looked at Ethan. "That seat is for family," he said. "Get down." Ethan hesitated, confused. His hand rested on the drawing. My father grabbed his shoulder and pulled. Not hard enough to leave marks, hard enough to make a point. The chair tipped. Ethan fell. And no one moved. I don't remember deciding to stand. I just was. I didn't remember raising my voice. I didn't need to. "We are leaving right now." I picked up my son. I picked up his drawing from the floor. I took our coats and walked out into the snow. No one followed us. In the car, Ethan whispered, "Did I do something bad?" I said no. But inside, something broke that I would never glue back together. That night, after Ethan slept, I opened my laptop and started writing everything down. Dates, words, looks, incidents I'd excused, things I'd minimized, moments I'd told myself weren't worth fighting over. 3 days later, my father signed for a letter he never expected, and that was only the beginning. The morning after Christmas, my phone started ringing before the sun came up. I didn't answer it. At 6:12 a.m., my mother left a voicemail. Her voice was tight, controlled, already rearranging the story. "Rachel, your father didn't mean it like that. Ethan startled him. You know how he is about order. Please call me." At 6:27, my sister Claire texted, "You completely overreacted. You embarrassed Dad in front of everyone. The kids were confused. You should apologize." At 6:41, my aunt messaged, "Families fight. Don't turn this into something bigger than it was." Not one message asked how Ethan was. I didn't respond. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee going cold, watching Ethan eat cereal with one hand while coloring with the other. He was quiet, not sad, not angry, just careful, like someone learning a new rule they didn't understand yet. When I lifted his sweater to check his back, there was already a bruise blooming along his shoulder blade, red turning purple at the edges. I took 3 photos, time-stamped, clear. That afternoon, my father came to my door. He didn't knock gently. He knocked like he owned the place, because he believed he did. When I opened the door, he didn't look past me toward Ethan's room. He didn't ask if his grandson was hurt. "You humiliated me," he said, "in my own house." "I pushed a child," I replied. He waved his hand. I barely touched him. He fell because he was clumsy. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, clarity. "This conversation is over," I said. "You're not welcome here." He stepped forward, lowering his voice. "That's my property. I can come whenever I want." I reached behind the doorframe and pressed record on my phone. "Say that again," I said. He scoffed and repeated it. Slower this time. Louder. I closed the door. That recording lasted 42 seconds. 42 seconds of entitlement, contempt, and ownership spoken out loud by a man who believed words disappeared once said. They don't. That afternoon, I called Dr. Lila Chen, Ethan's pediatrician. She examined him, documented the bruise, and asked careful questions, professional ones, questions with weight. I answered honestly. That evening, after Ethan went to bed, I opened a new document, incident log. I started at the beginning, the first time my father corrected Ethan's name in front of guests because it sounded adopted. The time he told Ethan not to sit on the couch because that's for the real grandkids. The birthday he forgot. The Christmas where Ethan's gift was an envelope with $10 while the other kids opened boxes. I wrote everything. Dates when I could remember them, direct quotes when I could, patterns when I couldn't. By midnight, the document was 11 pages long. The next morning, my grandmother called. Her name is Margaret Hale, 84, sharp as winter air. She didn't soften her words. She said, "Your mother told me you caused a scene. Tell me what actually happened." So I did. She didn't interrupt. She didn't excuse. When she finished, she was silent long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, "Rachel, who told you that house belongs to your father?" I frowned. "Everyone?" That wasn't an answer. "He inherited it," I said. "Didn't he?" "No," she replied calmly. "I never transferred the deed." The room felt suddenly too small. "That house," she continued, "is still in my name, every inch of it." I sat down. "He's been charging you rent," she said, not asking. "Yes." "For how long?" 7 years. Another pause, shorter this time. Dangerous. "I'm calling my attorney," she said. "Do not say a word to your parents. Not one." Her attorney's name was Daniel Roth, estate law, methodical, quiet, the kind of man who reads everything twice. By the end of the day, he had confirmed it. The deed, the property records. My father had no legal claim to the house. None. 7 years of rent paid to someone who did not own the property. Daniel didn't raise his voice when he said it. "That's not just immoral," he said. "That's actionable." 2 days later, he found something else. My grandmother had set up an education trust years ago for all her great-grandchildren. My father was the trustee. Daniel requested the statements. The withdrawals told a story no one wanted to read. Thousands labeled educational expenses, all for Claire's children, private camps, tutors, programs. Ethan's name didn't appear once. Not once. "He never added your son as a beneficiary," Daniel said. I stared at the screen. "Was that legal?" "No," he replied. "It was deliberate." That night, my grandmother made 3 decisions. She froze the trust, she amended it, naming Ethan as sole beneficiary, and she authorized a 30-day notice to vacate. Certified mail. 3 days later, my father received the letter, and the man who had always controlled the room lost his footing. The first call came 12 minutes after the certified letter was delivered. I didn't answer. The second call came from my mother, then my sister, then a number I didn't recognize. By noon, my voicemail was full. My father didn't leave messages. He never did. He preferred confrontation. Control worked better in real time. At 1:47 p.m., he showed up. This time, he didn't knock. He pounded. I opened the door far enough to see him, not enough to let him in. "You went behind my back," he said. "You manipulated your grandmother." I told her the truth. "She's old," he snapped. "She doesn't understand what she's signing." "She understands exactly who pushed a child to the floor." His jaw tightened. "You're destroying this family." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, "No, I stopped protecting you." He stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. "You have 30 days. Any further contact goes through my attorney." I closed the door. That night, my sister Claire sent a group text to the entire extended family. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Aunts, uncles. "Rachel is taking advantage of Grandma's condition. She's trying to steal the house and punish Dad over a misunderstanding. Please talk some sense into her before she ruins everything." I didn't respond. Instead, I sent one thing to one person. The recording. 42 seconds of my father saying the house was his and that Ethan wasn't even blood. My aunt replied 2 minutes later. "Oh God." The calls slowed after that. Meanwhile, the paperwork kept moving. Daniel filed to remove my father as trustee. The court ordered a full accounting of the trust. Every withdrawal, every receipt, every justification. My father hired an attorney, a loud one, the kind who threatens before he reads. Daniel didn't engage. He let the documents speak. 3 weeks passed. Ethan started seeing a counselor. He didn't cry. He didn't rage. He asked questions. Why didn't Grandpa like me? Did I do something wrong? Am I real family? I answered every one of them the same way. You belong. That never depended on him. On day 28, my mother came alone. She stood on the porch, hands folded, eyes red. "Please," she said, "your father can't handle this. He's sick. He's humiliated." "He should be." She flinched. "He didn't mean—" "He meant every word," I said. "You just chose not to hear them." She stepped closer. "Where will we go?" "You had 7 years to save rent money. You'll figure it out." She cried. I didn't stop her. I also didn't move. That night, Daniel called. "They didn't contest the notice," he said. "They're leaving." 2 days later, the trust accounting arrived. 14 withdrawals, 0 for Ethan, tens of thousands misused. The judge removed my father as trustee without a hearing. My grandmother appointed Daniel. The education fund was restored, not fully, but enough. Ethan's name was now first on the document. When I told him he didn't understand the money, he understood the meaning. "Can they take it away?" he asked. "No," I said, "not anymore." On the 30th day, a moving truck pulled out of the driveway. My father didn't look at the cottage, didn't look at me. He left behind a house that was never his, and a family that finally saw him clearly. I stood in the doorway with Ethan beside me, his hand in mine. He didn't ask where they were going. He asked, "Can we paint my room now?" "Yes," I said, "we can paint anything you want." That was the moment I understood something I should have learned years earlier. Revenge doesn't always look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like ownership. Moving day didn't feel like a victory. It felt quiet, surgical, like the moment after a storm when you step outside and realize the damage is real, but the air is finally still. My parents were gone by noon. By evening, the cottage behind the house felt different. Not lighter, just honest. No footsteps I had to interpret, no voices through walls, no tension hiding in silence. Ethan and I ate dinner on the floor of his new room, pizza boxes between us, paint samples spread like oversized flashcards. "What color do you want?" I asked. He thought hard, too hard for a 10-year-old choosing paint. "Blue," he said finally, "but not sad blue, brave blue." So we painted brave blue. We worked until midnight, laughing when we dripped paint on ourselves, leaving handprints near the closet that I pretended not to notice. That wall would need repainting someday, but not yet. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Court notice. The probate court had scheduled a review hearing, not because we requested it, but because the judge wanted to formally document the trustee removal and misuse of funds. Daniel warned me. "You don't have to attend," he said, "but your presence matters." So I went. I sat in the back row. Ethan was in school. My grandmother sat beside me, small and upright, hands folded like she'd done for decades at parent-teacher meetings. My father looked smaller, not weak, just exposed, without authority to hide behind. The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He read numbers, dates, duties. Failure of fiduciary responsibility, misrepresentation, selective exclusion of a legal beneficiary. Each phrase landed like a stamp. My father's attorney tried to reframe it as confusion, family misunderstanding, oversight. The judge didn't buy it. Trusts, he said, exist to protect those who cannot protect themselves, children, future students, not adult egos. The gavel came down. Final. Outside the courthouse, my father stopped me. "Was this worth it? You've torn everything apart." I looked at him, really looked. I didn't tear anything. I stopped pretending it wasn't already broken. He shook his head. "You've made enemies." "No, I stopped calling abuse family." He had no answer for that. The fallout came fast after that. Relatives who had ignored me for years suddenly wanted context. Some apologized, some didn't. Some disappeared again when they realized reconciliation required accountability. I didn't chase any of them. Ethan changed in ways that were small but unmistakable. He stopped flinching at raised voices. He slept through the night. He laughed louder. One afternoon, while doing homework at the kitchen table, he looked up and said, "You didn't beg this time." "No," I said, "I didn't." "Good," he nodded. "I don't like begging." Neither do I thought. The trust funds were officially restored 2 weeks later. A new account, new oversight. My grandmother insisted on monthly statements mailed to both of us. "This way," she said, "no one ever forgets who it's for." On a quiet Sunday morning, I found Ethan standing in the doorway of the dining room. The big table was empty. "Do we need more chairs?" he asked. I shook my head. "Only if we invite people who deserve them." He smiled. That night, after he fell asleep, I sat alone at the table with a cup of tea, and something settled deep in my chest. I hadn't just protected my child. I had taught him something my parents never taught me. That belonging is not something you earn by staying quiet. It's something you build by refusing to accept less. The last letter came in early spring. No return address. No apology. Just 4 sentences written in my father's tight, slanted handwriting. "You didn't have to take it this far. Families forgive. You chose pride over peace. I hope you're satisfied." I read it once. Then I folded it neatly and placed it in the same folder where I kept the court orders, the trust documents, the photographs, the things that mattered. Not as a threat, as a record. Because satisfaction had nothing to do with it. Peace did. Spring changed the house. Not dramatically, subtly, the way real change always does. Windows opened more often. Shoes left by the door without anyone complaining. Music playing while dinner cooked. Ethan started inviting friends over without asking if it was okay. He assumed it was. That assumption told me everything. One evening, while we were setting the table, he paused. "Where should I sit?" he asked. I stopped what I was doing. "Anywhere you want." He pulled out a chair, sat down, didn't look around for permission. That was the moment I knew the damage was healing. The trust paperwork finalized in April. Education funds locked. Oversight clear. His name printed where it always should have been. My grandmother watched Ethan sign his first savings withdrawal slip for a school science trip and smiled like she'd just corrected a mistake that had bothered her for years. "Now it's right," she said. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My parents never came back. They didn't show up unannounced. They didn't send gifts for the child. They didn't ask to talk things through. Silence can be an answer. So can distance. I ran into my mother once at the grocery store. She looked older, smaller, the kind of tired that doesn't come from age, but from holding on to a version of yourself that no longer works. She glanced at my cart, school snacks, blue paint samples, Ethan's favorite cereal. "He looks happy," she said quietly. I said, "He is." She waited. I didn't fill the space. "I didn't think it would end like this," she said. I met her eyes. "It didn't end, it changed." She nodded, as if that was harder to accept. And then she walked away. That night, Ethan asked me something I didn't expect. "Do you miss them?" I thought about it, really thought. I miss who I hoped they'd be, but not who they were. He considered that. "Me too," he said, even though he barely remembered them. That told me everything. The painting still hangs in the hallway. Not the old one. A new one. A long table. 4 chairs. Us. My grandmother. People with open faces and steady hands. No one pushed out. No one watching from the corner. When Ethan finished it, he didn't ask where to hang it. He picked the spot himself. That's what this was all about. Not revenge, not exposure, not winning. It was about stopping the quiet teaching of harm. It was about refusing to let my child learn that love requires endurance, that belonging must be earned, that silence is safety. I didn't raise my voice that night at Christmas. I didn't threaten. I didn't beg. I stood up. I took my child, and I built a table that couldn't be taken away. 3 days later, my father received a letter that made his hands shake, but the real consequence came later. It came every day after, when we sat down to eat without fear, when my child chose a chair without hesitation, when I stopped shrinking to fit into rooms that never wanted me whole. That's how it ended. Not loudly, not dramatically, just firmly. If this story stayed with you, there's another one waiting for you in the description. A different family, a different moment, the same choice. Check it out when you're ready. And remember this: you don't owe anyone a seat at your table who would push your child to the floor. The moment you stop begging is the moment everything changes.